Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
February 19, 2020, the Pardons edition. First up, from the Financial Times, an interesting article about the Airbus case entitled "Airbus Case Reflects France's Changed Ways on Corruption." France's reputation for disregarding global corruption and outsourcing big cases to the U.S. looks to have been put to bed following last month's Airbus settlement. Paris prosecutors took the driving seat in the international investigation, armed with a new set of anti-corruption laws introduced in 2016. Airbus agreed to draw a line under more than a decade of corruption involving bribes, fraudulent contracts, and fake invoices. Frankly, I think the French were tired of U.S. regulators penalizing French companies for engaging in bribery and corruption, and decided to do something to bring themselves into the international family of international anti-corruption enforcement. Next up, we have the first former client of Mossack Fonseca, the Panamanian law firm engaged in massive illegal money laundering, plead guilty, as reported by Dylan Tokar over at the Risk and Compliance Journal at the Wall Street Journal. Harold Joachim von der Goltz has pled guilty in the U.S. to connection with money laundering, and now becoming the first individual to plead guilty in the U.S. to charges stemming from the leaked documents known as the Panama Papers. He's a former U.S. resident, and he pled guilty to a 9-count criminal indictment, including charges of conspiracy to evade taxes and to commit money laundering and wire fraud. It's about time that people who were identified in the Panama Papers were brought to justice, and it's good to see this first guilty plea occur. The bad news continues for Boeing as the Wall Street Journal reports that Boeing has found debris in the fuel tanks of undelivered 737 MAX jets. The company is conducting inspections for grounded aircraft before they are allowed to return to service, and it said it had found debris in an undisclosed number of jets parked at its facilities in Washington State and in the state of Texas, where the planes had been stored since the global ban on commercial 737 MAX flights. The company has stored the planes waiting for approval. It's not clear how the debris got in the fuel tanks, but it was discovered during routine inspections, and Boeing did not detail how many planes were affected or when they rolled off the production line. The concerns about production shortcomings could add a new and potentially disruptive factor at the FAA as it vets Boeing and the 737 MAX fleet in its return to service. Let's just say Boeing's reputation for veracity at the FAA is not high right now. And as an additional part of the Airbus story, there's continued fallout in secondary investigations. Avianca Holdings had their offices raided by Colombian prosecutors, once again reported by Dylan Tokar over at the Wall Street Journal. And it really points out the global nature of the Airbus anti-corruption settlement, but why companies in the aerospace industry now need to be vetting their operations much more closely. I would expect the next round of investigations to begin to include suppliers and other third parties who may have been in business with Airbus. Are you prepared for major disruptions from suppliers, third parties, or others along the lines of the coronavirus? So think about it from the compliance perspective. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. Thanks so much for listening.